Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I don't want to say ladies and gentlemen, but friends. Glad that you're here in the garden, actually in the moat. This was the moat of the city wall of the 14th century. Before we start the discussion, I expect that when people hear us, they might feel attracted to join. I would like Gila to again invite to make use of her sculpture, which she created extra for this event, for the 20 years, 300 years Jewish community, 20 years Blaues Haus. I'm giving around the guest book because can you see it's 100% empty. So if you feel like making an entry just now, do it, otherwise you pass it on, right? I start with Carl. If you say, I want to do it tomorrow, it's okay, then it will return to you. Here's Gila. Gila Wiemer.
Ja, ich freue mich, yes, English. I'm glad to explain again my installation. My installation is a wish tree, which you see behind you. Actually, I would like to make it's important also the wall. The wall is ואהבת לרעך כמוך. Liebe deine wie dich selbst. And it's written in different languages. And I'm also moved to see that we have here also a representative of the Roma group. So you're very welcome to join us. Actually, we met already dancing with the Torah roller in the place where the old synagogue in Freiburg was, and it was a very touchy moment. This wish tree asks you to write a note, whatever wish you want to pass away to the next visitor, to God above, to the children. And I'm glad to see that some already did put their wishes, and some are very philosophical, high above, and some are, please God, don't let me be lost again here in Breisacher. So just feel free and write whatever it comes through your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Gila, and thank you, and Reinhard, for your amazing work, which already had a storm pass, and it survived very well. And thank you very much, and I hope that there will be more and more pieces coming together, wishes on paper. I did introduce Florian on the Synagogenplatz, but maybe I have to do it again. Florian came in this morning after a federal conference in Neuengamme, close to Hamburg, where he was in leading. Yeah, you were among the organizing, co-organizing, and I repeat myself, but Florian was teaming the Action Reconciliation Peace Services organization, calls it teaming, a group of 10 students from mostly Eastern Europe in the year 2003. So that was right after the dedication of the Blue House. and that is 20 years ago, as you know. I don't have to say that. And Florian, we met Florian quite a few times during the last 3 years because he was asked by his was heißt Arbeitgeber? His employer, which is the Topographie des Terrors in Berlin, a very interesting institution doing research on the perpetrators. Danke. Danke. Okay. To coordinate 30 projects in Germany. We are the 30th project down here in southern Baden in a federal program called Jugend erinnert, Youth is Remembering. And we were granted quite a bit of money for 3 years to work on the Breisacher Baden-Gürs topic. So he was, through COVID, we had Zoom sessions and he coordinated, and we learned quite a bit. So we asked him, he speaks, by the way, German, English, French, Polish, and Russian. So whatever you want to say at the side, he's probably the person who's best understanding. Willst du dich noch mal selbst vorstellen? Bisschen, oder? Ja, bitte.
So thank you very much, Christiane. I feel very honored that I was asked to moderate this exchange this afternoon. So we had the ceremony at the Synagogenplatz earlier today, but as Christiane mentioned, so everyone has a lot to say, certainly. And so I understand this afternoon session here in the Garden, such as there's just more of an opportunity to get into conversation, into exchange, into maybe some stories. So that, well, we can just delve into these 20 years of the Blue House, but certainly maybe also the family stories in some parts, and the earlier history of Breisach. And so Christiane asked me if I wanted to introduce myself. I think, there's not much I have to say today. So I'm the moderator, so the floor will be more to you. But in fact, I have a sort of double role today because on the one hand side, I am a sort of witness. I remember in 2003, so we didn't make it to the opening ceremony of the Blue House, but in 2 weeks of, I think it was August, we were digging in the garden here, so there are holes that do not exist anymore, but we also tried to take the earth out of the basement. And that was, just as one bit of a story, that was pretty interesting. That was pretty interesting because we discovered the, well, maybe not ancient, but very old, century-old floor that was actually the pavement of the moat that used to be here, I think since the Middle Ages. So we had the conservation officer coming here, and to us that was just a real discovery. And so the feeling that working here with an international group of youngsters at the Blue House, we can contribute something to this project of documenting the Jewish story. In that case, we were documenting the even further going story back to the Middle Ages, which is, however, just the ground on which also the Jewish community house was standing. So that's just my role as a sort of witness of what I remember, a bit of it, what was here 20 years ago. There's a lot more. But in fact, so I also come from Berlin just to, support and express our support for the activities going on here in the Blue House in trying to make the memorial work ready for the future, in working with young people, doing the research and making it accessible to the visitors. Now, I was well prepared by Valeska and Christiane, so I read all your descriptions of the families, and realizing, however, that some people had to leave earlier, and it's also quite a complex task to delve into all the different family stories and trying to figure out how you are connected, in persons whom I did not see earlier than today, to the different families. I thought by myself, maybe to get an overview, first of all, it might be helpful to ask you first, what your generations were in connection to the Blue House project. So what I would like to ask you, so I just learned there's even a time before Christiane and a time after Christiane, but I am not quite sure when the shift was exactly, but let's just take 2003. So let me ask you, who among you, whether you came from far or whether you're locals, who among you was here at the Blue House in 2003 or earlier? So please raise your hand just to get an idea. Okay. So that's a couple of you.
Monika.
Okay. So there are quite a few among you. Okay. And who did come after 2003 for the first time? But let's take it the other way around. So who is here for the first time this year? Okay, so this year, so that's also some of you. Okay, so let's say 2023. Okay, thank you. And who is neither one or the other group? So who came here for the first time between 2003 and 2023? Okay, so that's a couple of you. Okay, so I would like to ask first of all, maybe those involved in the association that were here already quite a long time. So, what brought you here? What was your motivation in the first place? We learned the story. There was Michael Eisenman in 1999 suggesting that a museum be built. I would just like to ask, maybe we can start with Christiane. So when you came here to the Blue House, so you mentioned, it was 5 years earlier than 2003 that the association was created. What took you there?
I was German. We say Zaungast. What is Zaungast in English?
Bystander.
Sitting in the fence.
I was standing with Elaine when the Synagogenplatz was dedicated, because she was the only second generation participant with Gary, her partner, who unfortunately died. And I offered to interpret for her, because the city hadn't thought of somebody would not know German. And so I already knew the oldest daughter of the only Jewish woman who was not deported, Selma Zieler. And she had, I got the key to the cemetery from her in February 1998, and was able to visit the Jewish cemetery, the new cemetery, for the first time. So, and then when there was a goodbye situation, Ralf knew, of course, Liesel very well, and he said, I have two wishes. He said, can you, actually ask Liesel, but I knew that she would not go to the archive in Freiburg. He said, here is Alice, Liesel's daughter, and we say hello. So Alice, come on in our circle. And she's also a neighbor. So her grandmother, I just talked about, was the only Jewish woman who survived all the years of the Nazi time with her family, with her children. I just talked about her mother, the oldest daughter of Selma Zieler, née Bergheimer. And unfortunately, there's no person of the Bergheimer family with us. Ralph said, can you help me to understand two things? First of all, why did my baby brother die in 1925? Heinz, half a year old, he's buried here. And second, what did really happen with my father? So it turned out that the suicide of Michael Eisenmann created in the family like a taboo and was not spoken about. He died in the hospital, which is true, but it's not the whole truth, because he took his life in the hospital. And so I got a sheet of paper, and he gave me permission to go to the archive, and the first time I looked into the files. So then he returned with we have heard the story I think 3 times today, that he returned in 1999 in summer, said, I'm going to come back one more time with the 3 granddaughters. And by then he had like a couple of little tiny pictures. For example, the picture of the praying room upstairs, which nobody knew was a complete secret here. And there he said this, I dream of a small museum. But we hadn't even purchased the house. So then we got ready to, very quickly, in a matter of weeks, I went to people who I didn't know very well and asked, do you think it's possible to create an association and to buy the house, So nobody was enthusiastic, to be honest, but they said, well, let's try. So that was the beginning.
So if I understand right, it's like the encounter, which is also in the beginning. Someone was coming, asking you to support in gaining knowledge about the family history. And maybe, Elaine, may I ask you to share your first, coming to Breisach and to this house? Was that a similar situation, that you were searching for knowledge or for more information?
I guess I had come here. Is this working?
Yes, okay.
I had come here in 1959 and gone to Alice's mother, Selma. Oh, grandmother.
My mother is Liesel.
I know.
Yes.
Liesel said she helped my mother pack her bags to come to America in 1936. So we had gone and gotten the key to the cemetery then, and that was my first time in Breisach. And when I came back again, it was at the request, the invitation that my mother and aunt got in 1998 from Mayor Van Arp to come for a week for the dedication of the synagogue in Platz and for the installation of Hans David Bloom's book about the Jews of Breisach in the museum here. And Hans and my mother were very close friends. They were they were in the same classes. And so I came instead of my mother. My mother was too ill to come. My aunt would never come. They were completely different personalities. I came with my partner.
Louder, please.
Okay.
The mic's not working. Yeah, you have to put it close to your mouth.
And I came with my partner, Gary, and with Hans and Lottie, and Bea and Ralph, and Fred Court, and all the people who grew up here. And it was a very moving time. We were taken to various synagogues and to the cemetery. And at the end of the week, what I remember was Christiane coming into the room that we were having coffee in with Liesel and introducing herself. and telling us this idea she had about she wanted the blessing of the people in the room, nothing more than that, with this idea of purchasing the Blue House. So I've been there. It's just been amazing, an amazing journey to watch what's happened here over these last 25 years.
Thank you. I mean, me coming back after almost 20 years, I mean, that's also a sort of return. I imagine, in your case, you mentioned the different people in your family that would have not come, that came as you did. Well, it did have very mixed feelings about coming. Could you maybe say one word more about how that felt arriving here? Was it a sort of return, or was it, you mentioned you were here earlier, or was it rather of meeting new people and discovering something new?
Well, just to say that the first time I came here with my parents and my uncle, my father's brother, who grew up in a little village in Alsace near Strasbourg, Kolbsheim. My uncle had been a French soldier during the Second World War and a prisoner of war, a Jewish prisoner of war in a stalag in Germany, and had been separated from his family for 5 years, and this was a very big reunion. And when we came here, because my mother really wanted to come to the cemetery, it was, I will never forget how scared they all were. They were just pale and frightened when they had to approach the customs officers. Of course, I noted that, but I didn't really understand it. And I really had no feeling about Breisacher until, I think really it was not until Christiana and the Fort of Rhine were formed. Before that, it was an interesting and sad part of my mother's life. But I don't, fortunately, none of her family were killed. They got out. So I think it's what's happened since that's been the most important for me, because I feel very beloved and everybody has been so amazing. It's much more than just a visit when I come. It's kind of like a Heimat again.
Thank you. I'm sure that for many of you, there are these mixed feelings coming to Breisach, and then there is this first time of maybe returning, maybe coming here. I don't know how to describe it. I'm sure there may be others of you that would like to share how that was coming here. I'm not quite sure if there are others that were here in 1998 already. Probably not, but I think in 2000 and 2003 there are others. Maybe there is someone. Okay.
I think the year was 2000. My name is Carl Stieg. And I think the first time that we came here was around 2003, or pretty sure that was what it was. And my connection here is through my mother, who was born here. Her name was Margaret Stieg, their married name. Her family history here is through the name Kahn. Her father, Nathan Kahn, was born here, as was his father, Kushal Kahn. And it's through the Kahn family and the Levy family with a Y that we have our connection to Breisach. Interestingly enough, Elaine's mother and my mother knew each other very well in Breisach, apparently, and kept in touch in the United States. I never met Elaine. Never. Until Christiane came along.
And we live nearby.
And we live nearby, that's right. Elaine and I live a few blocks from each other. We live very close to each other, within walking distance. And anyway, the funny part of the story is that Elaine's mother, Christiane, came and visited Elaine. and wanted to visit my mother, having heard about my mother, and she wanted to make contact with people who had been previously involved in Breisach, Jewish people. She knew about my mother, but had never heard from her or met her, but wanted to go and visit her. So it was my job as the driver to drive Christian to my mother's house. And I had to pick Christian up at Elaine's house. And that's how I met Elaine and found out we're actually related to each other. And we've been close friends ever since. So it was through Breisach. And by the way, it's interesting, I've always asked this question. My mother always called it Breisacher with a hard S. And I hear people here say Breisacher with a soft Z sound. I never knew which was right. But my mother always spoke, my mother spoke true Breisacher Deutsch. There's no question about that.
Breisacher Deutsch.
Breisacher Deutsch, danke vielmals. My first trip to Breisach, I was here in 2003, but my first trip to Breisach was when I was here in the Army. I was in the United States Army stationed here in Heilbronn from 1965 to 1967. And it was during that time that I went to Breisach for the first time and visited my grandfather, Natan Khan, his gravesite. My mother was always talking about Breisach, the Breisach that she knew, not the Breisach that in her mind it became. To her, Germany was Nazi. After she had to leave, and she felt, well, she grew up in Breisach, she never felt any anti-Semitism whatsoever. She played with, she was taught by Christian nuns, she had non-Jewish friends, and the word anti-Semitism for her never even existed. So when it actually happened that she had to leave the country with me, by the way, I was born in Karlsruhe, just as an aside, with me and my father, she never wanted to come back to Germany again, and even though Germany, the life that she remembered was the life that she always talked about. She always talked about her father, and I thought you were gesturing to me, Christiana. Anyway, the life that she always talked about was the wonderful life she had here in Breisach, but that life had changed for her and she never wanted to return again. She returned for the first time, sort of against her better judgment, she thought. When my daughter was born in 1965, I think she's sitting there, my daughter Jennifer, she wanted to see her first grandchild. So she came here to Germany for the first time, met me in Heilbronn, and got to meet Jennifer, who was born in Stuttgart and eventually to Heilbronn, where she was raised for her first year. And my mother, interestingly enough, this is a cute story, my mother spoke German all the time at home. German was her first language, except when she came to Germany. She refused to speak German. Refused to speak German. And when she came, we visited here in Breisach at the time too. She came and she went to visit Zielerle. Die Zielerle.
Zielerle, ja.
Die Zielerle hat sie gesagt.
That's my grandmother.
That's her grandmother. Die Selma Zielerle hat immer den Schlüssel gehabt.
Yes.
For the cemetery. And she wanted very much, of course, to visit her father at that time. She had been back many times since. But in her heart, her youth in Breisach was always a very much part of what she always talked about. And she eventually came to accept the fact that every German was not a Nazi. And that was a big revelation to her, and of course, it was a change that was not easy for her to make. We've been back a number of times since then, and now I'm here with my children and grandchildren back there, and it's the first time, it's not their first time here. Their first time here is sort of adults, and for them to be able to understand exactly what the Blue House is all about. And I've talked far too much, and I'll pass it back on again.
I remember when I met you and Elaine, that on Elaine's Wohnzimmertisch, on her table in her living room, lay a sheet of paper that clearly was Hans David Blum's handwriting, and he drew up the relationship between, in a family tree, of Elaine, of Karl, the Kahn family, of Grumbach. Now we have Scott here in our middle, a Grumbach descendant, and of who was the fourth? So I think he did it for you to show how you and himself, the Blum family, and that is still we still work with that, although we can add a lot more. For me, it was fascinating to see that what we had now as a like 6-7 meter family tree. This was a sheet of paper and it was handwritten. Wer holt mal den Stammbaum aus dem großen Zimmer, dass wir ihn hier auslegen? Danke.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing to learn that actually the Breisach connections were not just made here, but elsewhere. And I found it as well, rather surprising, I have to say, that you say your mother was speaking more positively about Breisach than about Germany as a whole. So maybe it's understandable, so it was her childhood certainly, but on the other hand side, I imagine that, Jewish people that had to leave the families, had also the direct experience of maybe being discriminated against, being persecuted, having to leave, and so I wonder, how this was dealt with in the families, whether there wasn't maybe particularly bad feelings about Breisach, about the nearer surroundings. And I just wanted as well, maybe you're thinking about, and then there's the genealogy is coming. That's great. Yeah, it might be sort of help as well. Who did it, Christiane? So, who's the officer in chief? Knowing all of it?
Well, I guess I fed most names into the database, but the construction of the family tree was Andrea Dettling's. She's the master of the database, and she was here until yesterday, and so I gave her like these 4 names. Can you read it, Lena? You want it?
Yes.
I think it's the Hans Blum one sheet family tree.
Yeah.
Who is the next one? The yellow?
I'm the yellow. This is the next yellow.
The next yellow.
The next yellow, sorry.
I think that's Scott.
Scott.
And then here?
This one? Tenzer. Uri Tenzer.
Uri Tenzer, yeah. And then?
And then
Bear.
Robert Barr. Bear.
So I gave her 4 names out of the list and said, can you make a family tree? So that's also 20 years or 25 years of work coming from the handwritten notes of Hans Blum, whom we owe very, very much, I have to say. We need explanation for the noise. Do you want to know what it is?
What the applause is?
Huh?
The applause we're hearing?
It's
Tennis, I think.
Huh?
It's tennis,
Tennis? Ist es nicht, aber es läuft oben auch das Theaterstück, das ist es nicht. Nee? Ist Tennis? Okay. Fernsehen, TV.
Okay, so before I would like to ask the questions about the family sentiments regarding to Breisach. I was just thinking, so you were mentioned as a descendant of this Zieler family, if I got it right. Maybe you could just say a word also on your perspective with regarding to those people coming and returning here.
You can speak German.
Ich muss es leider in Deutsch sagen, weil ich kann gut Französisch, aber nicht Englisch gut. Also, ich soll was erzählen von meiner Großmutter, oder?
Wie du vor 20 Jahren das mitbekommen hast, was hier entsteht.
Also ich weiß nur, dass meine Großmutter sehr viel Besuch bekommen hat aus aller Welt, weil sie besuchten alle den Jugendfriedhof und meine Großmutter hatte ja den Schlüssel zum Friedhof. Und sie hat natürlich sehr viele gekannt. Und dann gab es immer schön Schwätzle und einen Kaffee und einen Tee. Und meine Großmutter hat sich immer sehr gefreut, wenn irgendjemand kam. Sie hat ja auch ihre Eltern verloren, sind ja auch alle umgekommen, die Tante, die Eltern. Und meine Großmutter hat eigentlich mir nicht gern erzählt über diese Zeit, weil das war sehr schwer für sie. Mir hat meine Mutter manchmal erzählt, meine Mutter war ja die älteste von 9 Kindern von Silas, die hat natürlich das meiste auch sehr viel mitgekriegt. Ne? Aber ich muss sagen, meine Großmutter hatte ja jetzt in den Jahren nach dem Krieg oder wo halt, ja, wo alles wieder normal lief, sehr viel Besuch von Amerika und die kamen immer zum Jugendfriedhof und haben sich gefreut, dass sie noch einen Ansprechpartner haben und konnten mit ihr über alte Zeiten reden. Und meine Großmutter hat natürlich sehr viele gekannt. Und ja, also meine Oma war zum Glück im Kopf sehr lange klar und gut, was natürlich schön war, ich habe mich immer gefreut, wenn zu der Oma Besuch kam aus aller Welt und mit ihr dann irgendwie halt wieder über alte Zeiten gesprochen wurde. Und dann im Jugendfriedhof, das war ja sehr schön. Mein Großvater hat den Jugendfriedhof auch sehr lange gepflegt und sogar mein Vater hat viel geholfen. Und ich muss sagen, ich habe also wirklich nur schöne Erinnerungen, wenn die Besuche aus Amerika und aus aller Welt waren. Und ich freue mich, dass Sie heute auch alle wieder hier sind. Und meine Oma da oben, die wird sich jetzt auch freuen. Vielen Dank.
Okay, I didn't have my notebook, so I didn't take notes. But so Alice remembers. First of all, she's happy to see you all again because she remembers that her grandmother, Selma, often received visitors from all over the world because she was the one to have the key to the Jewish cemetery, and so people would pass by to get the key. And Alice remembers that it was always good times because they could talk about the past, and the visitors were happy to have someone to talk to that still knew their families before the war. And she was happy because she could see some of them again and see what they were up to in the US and all over the world. So she remembers that as a child. And whereas her grandmother didn't talk very much to her about this time before the war, her mother did. She was the oldest of 9 siblings of the Zieler family. And so she also lived through this period and talked more than Selma. And her grandfather and father helped to take care of the cemetery. I feel like something is up with the microphone. So the whole family was sort of involved in taking care of the cemetery. And she has very good memories of these visitors coming from all over to her grandmother. She knew it made her grandmother happy, it made her happy, and it sustained this community, and your mother sustained this community, these community links. And I'm sure I forgot something, but that's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, very much. So, if I understand, so it's not like 25 years ago the association was starting from zero then. So it's like there had been the Jewish cemetery and there was someone who took care. There was someone having the keys, and maybe that's one of the keys to allow then the initiative to unfold in the following, I imagine. Well, there are so many other families around. Would you say a word on your family's relationships on Breisach before you came? So how was Breisach in your family's memory?
think the thing that surprised me the most in coming here was in finding out how rich the history was here, because my parents were from Offenburg and Durach. It was my grandmother and my great-grandmother who were here from Breisacher. And I always knew that fact, but I knew very little else about Breisacher. And when we came to visit Germany, both when I came with my father and when I brought my own children here, I said, there's nothing in Breisacher. There's no community left, you know, there's nothing, there's no reason to go there. And we stumbled in here in November of 2022, and I've just been so delighted to find out that there is a commitment here to remembering the history of the community. And also, I think like Carl and I never realized that so many of the people I knew growing up were actually people that my grandmother knew from Breisacher. Nobody ever said that, you know? So I just didn't realize that there was a Breisacher community in New York City.
So I think, of course, we're all descendants of someone, the ways our parents, our grandparents lived and experienced life have an importance for us today. But I think in particular, well, the stories of the Jewish population that had to leave Breisach, well, made things in many ways more difficult than, well, the stories were, well, to someone like me, a young person that grew up on the other side of the Black Forest and, well, was not into a situation of war, persecution, and the Holocaust. Yeah. I would like to ask you, so there are many of us around. So Christiane, in her talk earlier today, she mentioned that on her family side there was a silence. And I imagine to very different degrees there is silence in families with many, many different reasons. Jews, non-Jews alike. There's Mr. Waltz of the Roma community among us. So I'm just wondering, so we were just speaking about this connections to Breisach, how this story of persecution was dealt with and whether it was spoken about. Was that something you learned at a very late age in its details, or was that something that had always been with you in your families?
You ask now locals, is this right?
I'm asking everyone, yeah. So you might take the mic as well.
Hello, my name is Annette Zimmermann. I'm a local here, not from Breisach, but from 60 kilometers here near Basel. But I'm living now here in the area. I only had a question. You told us that a lot of people, or perhaps some people, were living or are living in New York, and they didn't talk about their connection. I'm too. Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I'm just gesturing at all these people that live together on the Upper West Side and never knew their connection until they connected through the Blue House.
Okay. Good. I come from a family which was from the north, from Germany, and from the south of Germany. And I think in our family there was a lot of open speaking about the Shoah, but nevertheless, I think when I was a student. We learned a lot in our school, and we were talking a lot about this in our youth groups. And I think I was a little bit prepared before I came here, or when I was, before I visited some concentration camps and so. But I think I was here with some students. I was a teacher, and sometimes it was very successful with them. They were very impressed by the story of this house. One time it was not so good, and I think it was perhaps my preparation wasn't so good. But I think it's still really a big task to talk about it, because now it's nearly it's so far away, and it's a generation of my grandfathers and perhaps also a little bit of my parents. But I think the younger, they don't have so much connection, and so I think it's very important to have such a commitment center like the Blue House here. That's it. I think the first time when I was here was the first time it was opened for the 1st of September or something like this. The first time, the first opening for the open day of the museums. I don't know when it was, 2000 perhaps? I don't know. 2000? Okay, good.
Not yet.
Okay, I give it back. Yeah.
So if I understood you right, so you were speaking now about the danger of forgetting. So youngsters, it's still a difficult topic and youngsters may not learn it. But I imagine actually this is something different to the situation when you know and yet it's so difficult to talk, maybe with your kids, maybe with your grandchildren. So maybe both of it is there today. There are these different reasons of speaking or not speaking. How was that in your other families? If I might come back to this question.
I am Markus Eschbach. In my family it was very quiet in this case. I don't hear anything about Shoah until I was 40. I heard nothing at home, I heard nothing at school. Even I had a book at home where are some bad pictures about opening the Auschwitz camp. I show this book this week, Karl. And so when I start to work in Geismar company, I don't know anything about this because I don't know that I'm working in a Geismar company, a Jewish company. Nobody knows it. So when the association starts, I was interested in this question because I, in this time, know that I am working in a Geismar Jewish company. If I heard it, it was very terrible when I heard it. Not for me, so I kind of heard it. I may repeat it shortly. I was in Kapuzinergarten, and when I worked some months for Geismar Group, and people asked me where I'm working now, because I was few months after military, so they are interested, they know me, where I'm working now, and I said I'm working by Semafair. Semafair was the name of the company in Breisacher from Geismar. In this time it was a fantasy name, and one of the people around me said, when I said I'm working to Geismar, he said, by the Jude. I don't know. Doch, right? Your boss is Mr. Geismar. Yes, clear? Siegisch, also. Say thought that I can know if the name is Geismar, that are Jewish people. I don't know it until this moment. So this was the beginning to interested me for the story, and in some years later, when Christiane founded the association, I was from the beginning on interested and together with the association, but I don't know anything until before.
Okay, so there was some knowledge who is Jewish, who is not Jewish, and you were not just yet introduced to it. So that would be, it's not like about what is taught in schools officially, it's rather about what is floating around and what role it plays, so whether you're Jewish or not. So it's like the continuity maybe also of anti-Semitism, of marking people, so that, you should know if you work in a Jewish company. Okay.
When we in 2000 went to the notary to purchase the house, the notar said, "You want to buy a house from a Jew?" This was the year 2000. It's only 23 years ago. But I'm thinking of Dan Baon, who was our teacher, and he came and visited and taught, and he would call it feeling facts. You know, something that's not expressed in words or in books, but you feel something is different, something's going on, you have a different feeling than that you cannot sort out, kind of. So maybe we can work a little bit with that term.
Yes, feeling facts. I'm looking a little bit in that direction. I remember, so some of you are coming here for the first time to Breisach this time, is that right? Would you just say a word or two about 2023? So what were the maybe feeling facts that you bring along, the subconscious knowledge with which you arrived here at Breisach? May I ask you?
My parents came last year, so I was already going to be in Europe, so we decided it made sense for me to join them. In my family, we've always kind of talked about, the family coming from Germany and things like that. As my mom said, we didn't make it to Breisach, so when we came as a family, so it was kind of exciting for me to be able to come and see a different part of where our family is from. And I'm glad that the timing worked out, that I was able to join them.
This actually, I scare myself. This is not my first time here in Breisach. If I raised my hand, I got confused about your time frame, but anyhow, this is actually my third time, but the first time I was 15 years old. My father grew up here and was born in 1916, left in 1937, and I had the experience, like a lot of us, where nothing was said by him about the Holocaust or what happened. It was just, verboten. He wouldn't. if you asked him a question, he would answer with, yes, no answers, and you knew he didn't want to talk about it. However, like Carl, he did talk fondly about Breisach in the sense of the childhood. And so there was this, mixed sort of message almost. Riding his bike and the Kaiserstuhl and the Feldberg and skiing and, it was like a different world. And, he was always touting the education system. I was telling them about that compared to the US. So, and then when we came, when I was 15, this was 1967, he still couldn't. What he did was have me read Diary of Anne Frank. No discussion afterwards about it, but just, I think, he didn't know, he couldn't deal with it emotionally himself, and he certainly couldn't, help me deal with it, so, through no fault of his own. So that was my experience. But in 2019, when I came and I discovered the Blue House, I decided to do some family history and discovered online the Blue House and wrote an email to Christiane. She emailed me right back, and I mean, it's just been a wonderful experience, and I have learned, 20 times more about my family history since I've been connected than, I ever learned at home. So. Yeah, it's a wonderful organization, really is. And, so.
Thank you very much. So,
Herr Riedel, wären Sie bereit, was zu sagen zu uns? Wir würden es übersetzen, wenn es mit Englisch nicht geht.
Doch, könnt ihr in Englisch sprechen.
Okay, I just saw our new neighbor joining here, and we had a little talk, and the door was open, there was renovation, so the tiny little yellow house across the street with those purple shutters, it's his house.
Butterfly color. Butterfly color.
And he told me he grew up in the house, which his parents purchased after the war, and I was able to see a small stable in the house. So it was a cattle dealer's house, and so these details are still there. And now he's going to. Well, I'm very touched and very happy. So I turn the microphone over to him, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how, as a child growing up, you realized where you grew up.
Yes. My name is Andreas Riedel, and I'm the neighbor in the opposite of the Blue House. And I grew up, I was born 1958. In the first 20 years I live here in Breisacher, and then I go to Freiburg the next 40 years, and now I come back to the hometown, to my hometown. You see, Breisacher is the middle of the world for some people. So what you want?
Well, I said to Herr Riedel, I think it was a Kleefeld house. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it goes in that direction. I think the name rang a bell for you. You have heard the name also. So did your parents talk about it?
Yes, of course. My parents come 1956 from Holstein. It's a country of Germany, the north of Germany, and they are searching for work, and they are coming here to Breisach because in the south of Germany they have enough work. And So they built 1956, they buy the house. It was a house from a cattle, Viehhändler, cattle dealer, yes. And so we lived there until 2010. My mother was lived in this house with 93 years old. And now I would like to, I renovate the house now and I will look to stay next.
So as a child, what did you do with the stable?
Stable?
What was it used for?
Ach so. We have two stall. In this, it is a house with a little Innenhof.
A little court?
Court, yes.
Court.
So it was normal that there was cattle, and my parents have pigs and Hühner. Chicken, yes. Okay. And two, yes. And so it was a Nebenerwerbslandwirtschaft. It calls because. Was heißt Nebenerwerbslandwirtschaft?
When you have a profession and a job, and when you come home in the evenings, on the weekends, you have like a small
Besides job jobbing.
What?
Besides the job jobbing.
Yes. This was a normal, I think, the normal way of living at that time. That you have also a field and you have cattle. This was. When we talk about 1956 to 1975, was a normal way, I think.
We have a member who unfortunately is not with us. He grew up in the street, and he told me that his father would take him as a child from house to house. He was walking down the street and he would mention every Jewish name of the house owners. So as a kid, he learned a lot about the street, and he never forgot that. So I was wondering if your parents mentioned something, but the difference is that your parents moved in, and here the father had witnessed, the disappearance of the Jewish community. So that's a difference. So did your parents mention it was Jews lived there, or the house?
We know about Alice. There was a neighbor, Alice Schneider.
Yeah? Oh, yeah.
Yes, there was a neighbor, of course, yes. But with the community of the Jews, we have no combine or no direction, yes.
Danke.
Herr Riedel, Ihr Vater war aber nicht der Lehrer Riedel, oder?
Nein.
Den gab es ja auch, ne?
Hier in Breisach?
Ja, von dem hat mein Mann immer erzählt.
Ah, okay, aber ich glaube, da hat sie geschrieben R-I-D-L oder sowas.
Vielleicht. Okay, danke.
Ja, danke schön.
So the question was whether Mr. Riedel was connected to the teacher, Riedel. So I found this very interesting. So Christiane's question was actually about also knowledge. Did you learn about the Jewish history? And you couldn't by your parents because they had come from another part of Germany, actually. And I think, well, maybe it's then interesting as well, because if I got your answer or your statement earlier right, that was very much, well, you couldn't be told a lot because the story was actually too difficult to tell. So that was actually what you mentioned earlier. So the easy things to be told, like childhood stories, that's something easy to convey. The difficult ones could not be told. Yeah, and so I think, you mentioned Dan Baon. So probably there still is the really hard conversations between maybe the former neighbors coming to terms, and I would say also from other experience. So it's very often the case, those starting the initiatives, it's the people from coming outside and saying, wait a minute, what was here? It's not those knowing already. Okay, so the need to learn something is the starting point very often. It's far more difficult for those who are set in a different mood and know some stories, maybe feelings, how was it like that they grew up with them, then to say, oh, wait a minute, I would like to welcome those people seeking knowledge. I would like to turn something around concerning the sentiment in our community. Well, so sorry, that was just a response to those two different statements. Maybe there's more you would like to share on Breisach, on your family backgrounds, so the sentiments you were coming with to Breisach.
Scott?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott. I first learned about my family's connection to Breisach back in 2017. I found, and you know, I'm sitting in a circle of people who have roots in Breisach. For many of you, your connections are much more recent. Your parents or grandparents were born here and raised here. My family, my great-great-grandmother left in 1874. So it's been a long time. So part of me sitting here over the last few days was saying, what kind of crazy person was I coming to Breisach? My family left so long ago. Everyone else has a much more immediate connection. And for many of you, you heard stories about this town. In our family, we don't have any of that because our family left so long ago. It's my father's great-grandmother, who he never knew. But we didn't even know we were from this town until I found their marriage license in their marriage certificate in the municipal archives in New York. It asked for their birthplace. And for Leopold Weil, my great-great-grandfather, it said he was born in Markelsheim, Alsace, on the Rhine. And my great-great-grandmother, it said Alt Breisach, Baden. And so that was the first time I had ever heard of Breisach. And it had her parents' names, Seligman Grumbach and Julie Picard. And they're buried here in the cemetery. So I visited their graves here in the cemeteries. And I'm a genealogist. It's my passion and my hobby. And I really love it. And I feel very connected as a Jew to my history. And it's important for me as an American Jew whose family has been in America for so long to connect to my past. Because, and you know, I think a lot about why I'm so interested in this. I spent a lot of time, because it's not normal for a 15-year-old to, you know, most 15-year-olds are drinking and doing drugs and playing basketball, and I was researching my family tree.
Hans Blum did that.
Hans Blum did too, and I've been told multiple times on this trip I'm the Hans Blum 2.0, and those are big shoes to fill, so I consider it a big compliment. He's my third cousin, twice removed, Hans Blum. And Elaine is my fourth cousin once removed, and Carl's my third cousin twice removed. And Larry Bergheimer's my cousin, and Uri Tanzer, and Bob Baer. We're all mishpacha. And so I think about this a lot, about why I'm so interested in this and why I'm so passionate about it. But I have had mixed feelings about coming to Germany. Even though my family, we're American Jews who have lived in America for so long already, we were told growing up, you do not buy a German car, you do not buy German products, and for sure you don't travel to Germany. And I think my family's surprised that I'm even here. And you know, I connected with Christiana back in 2017, and we've spoken about me coming on this trip for so long. And it was so obvious to me that I was going to come to Breisach. My family roots are here. But I did feel a certain level of tension within myself coming. Just to be totally honest, even just hearing German when I got off the plane in Switzerland is a little, the only time I really hear German is in World War II movies. And so, and I'm not saying that's the right way to feel, it's just how I felt in my gut. And that's something I have to work on, because I'm sitting here in Breisach with people who were born in Germany, who aren't Jewish, who've only treated us with warmth and love while we've been here. And so it's really mixed and it's really complicated. But I walk down the streets thinking that I hope my ancestors are proud of who I am and that I'm here. And I hope that I'm living a life that is worthy of being their descendant. And for me, I told the students this, walking down the street with a kippah and a Jewish star in Breisach is a little bit of a fuck you, we're still here. And I feel that way very strongly. So I'm not going to, not say what I mean. To me, it's like an Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people are here. And I feel that very strongly, because that's how my parents raised me. My mother always knew we'd have to deal with anti-Semitism, and she taught us to be proud Jews. And she's been reading my Facebook posts, and I speak to my parents every day while I'm here, and my parents cry. And they have no connection to Breisach, but something in them is like becoming emotional. So that's my long answer. And it's really a pleasure to be here. And Christiana, really, I watched you these last few days, and the way you interact with all the descendants, you have our family trees memorized. The whole thing is just absolutely amazing. And I keep on saying it to everyone, she's not normal, in the best way. And I want to thank you, really, and to everybody here. It's been amazing. Thank you.
A sentence like yours come up, then I have to thank my team. There's Rosita here, there's Valeska somewhere, I don't know. Who else is there? Vera is helping Almut, so it's a chance for you to meet our members and helpers. So Uwe came as a neighbor now, and the president of the History Club and the Museums Förderverein. And Vera has Russian roots, she's helping, and Almut is there. She was the, was sagt man so, gute Fee? Was ist gute Fee?
Angel.
Huh? She's the angel of 6 o'clock in the morning every day, comes in and cleans, so that when we arrive that we have a pretty good surrounding. So I want to, at this point, thank all of those very much.
So Christiane says, Uwe Farah can say something about the reception of the Blaues Haus within the city. Would you like to?
Ja, wenn ich es auf Deutsch sagen darf.
Okay. Go ahead.
Weil es ein bisschen differenzierter ist und mein Englisch reicht dafür nicht ganz aus.
Ja, die Beschäftigung mit der Geschichte der jüdischen Gemeinde in Breisach vor dem Blauen Haus war, ich sag mal, sehr zurückhaltend. Die Stadtgeschichte, die ab 1969 erschien, erwähnt die Geschichte der Juden in Breisach seltsamerweise erst im letzten 3. Band, wo es eigentlich zeitlich gar nicht hinpasst, aber scheinbar hat der Autor gedacht, am Schluss denke ich, ach ja, da gibt es ja noch etwas. Und das ist auch, denke ich, so die Grundeinstellung Breisacher Geschichte, lange Geschichte, Römer, Kelten, Festung. Und dann, ach ja, da gab es ja noch eine jüdische Gemeinde. Und das ist, glaube ich, die Grundeinstellung gewesen. Also ich bin hier seit 1991 und davor gab es ganz knapp davor erste Möglichkeiten, darüber hinaus etwas zu schreiben. Ich erinnere an Ludwig Dreyfus, der seine Erinnerungen geschrieben hat, davor in den 80er Jahren. Und
May I just take a bit of translation? Okay, thank you. You can continue in a second. So, so he said that prior to the Blue House project, dealing with the Jewish history in Breisach was rather hesitant, maybe reluctant. And as an example, might serve the city's history of 1969, in which only in the third volume, where it chronologically actually didn't fit, the Jewish history was dealt with. So actually that's symptomatic in that sense that there is a long and rich history of Breisach, Romans, the Celtics, the fortress and so on. And then there's a little bit of Jewish history as well, which is at some place attached but not that much connected to the rest of it. And Uwe Farrer himself, so he had been in Breisach since 1991 and now he was continuing.
Ja, und in dieser Zeit dann, in den frühen 90er Jahren, darf ich auch erinnern an eine wichtige Arbeit, die vom Gymnasium hier geleistet wurde durch die stellvertretende Direktorin, Frau Kalfers, die in einer ersten, wirklich größeren Publikation, Breisach Judengasse, den Spuren der jüdischen Geschichte auch anhand von einzelnen Schicksalen von Personen und Familien nachgegangen ist. Ich darf erst mal sagen, ich selbst, als ich hier nach Breisach kam, musste auch einmal erst schauen, was gibt es zur jüdischen Geschichte. Und ich bin damit eigentlich erst einmal in Kontakt gekommen, dadurch, dass ich schon von Freiburg, wo ich vorher war, die Idee hatte, die Geschichte einzelner Gebäude nachzuverfolgen, Hausgeschichte zu machen. Und das begann ich dann, ich glaube 1992, und stieß dann natürlich in der Rheintorstraße auf viele jüdische Geschichten von Häusern. Und das war auch so der Anlass für mich, mehr, selbst ich als Archivar und Historiker, mehr mich damit zu beschäftigen, wie war diese jüdische Gemeinde beschaffen, wo wohnten die Familien und so weiter. Ich darf halt einmal noch kurz zurückgehen und dann darf ich das Mikrofon wieder Ihnen geben. Dass hier in Breisach 1959 auf dem ehemaligen Synagogenplatz ein Denkmal errichtet wurde. Das gehört zu den sehr frühen in Baden-Württemberg, aber die Initiative kam nicht von der Stadt, sondern von einer überlebenden Breisacherin.
Schwester von Sister, Karls Aunt,
ja.
Helene Weil-Kahn.
Ja,
okay.
richtig.
Gretel's sister.
Older sister.
Ja.
I have to translate first.
So, he wants to mention another project of the 1990s when the then deputy high school director published a book on the Breisach Judengasse, which must not be forgotten. But as well to him, when he came here to Breisach as an archivist, the question was where to find sources, where to find the documents on the history. And so the grounds actually for dealing with the Jewish history lay actually in his idea to do the history of particular buildings. And that was something he had done in Freiburg earlier, where he had worked earlier. And so, without any choice, of course, so when he started to look at the buildings in Rheintorstraße, so of course there were simply so many buildings with a Jewish history that he had to start to look at that part as well. Some other earlier story that needs to be mentioned is that in 1959 on the Synagogenplatz a memorial was put. And that was not the initiative of the city, but that was an initiative of a survivor, and that's Karl's aunt, exactly.
What was her initiative? Yeah, I'm sorry, what was her initiative?
Ja, und in der Folgezeit habe ich mich natürlich auch mit der jüdischen Geschichte befasst. Frau Kalfas hat das getan, bis es dann zu der ersten Begegnung der Einladung kam, 1998. Das war auch eine Arbeit, die, ja, ich sag mal, die Impulse von außen bedurfte, damit die Stadt als Stadt dann wirklich die Initiative ergriffen hat, zu sagen, wir laden die Überlebenden, soweit wir Adressen haben, ein. Es war der Zeitpunkt der Neugestaltung des Synagogenplatzes, weil dieser Gedenkstein zu Recht vielleicht 1959 in der Form ja, geschaffen wurde, aber der Text darauf eigentlich nicht mehr in dieser Form zu vertreten war. Also eine Neugestaltung, ein neuer Text. Sie haben es ja gesehen auf dem Synagogenplatz, das heutige Denkmal, das sehr viel angemessener ist. Übrigens, auf dem Synagogenplatz befand sich ja seit 1959 bis, ich weiß nicht wann, also ich habe es noch gesehen, ganz frühe 90er, ein Kinderspielplatz. Also Kinderspielgeräte auf diesem Platz. Und das verstört vielleicht etwas, wie man auf einem solchen Platz herumtollt und ob das richtig ist an so einem Ort. Aber es war ja auch dies eine Idee ihrer Tante gewesen, nicht einen Platz, wo nichts ist, zu schaffen, sondern Kindern vielleicht eine Stimme zu geben auf diesem so schwer belasteten Platz und etwas Leichtigkeit vielleicht hineinzubekommen.
So in the 1990s, Mrs. Kalfas, who was this deputy school director, and himself, they were researching the Jewish history, and it needs to be said that this 1998 event, so the invitation to the survivors by the city, however, needed some, impulses from outside to have the city, in fact, organize something like this. So it did not come on its own. The connection was actually that there was need for a refurbishment or rearrangement of the Synagogenplatz at the time, because the monument of 1959, which had been back then maybe, an early monument which was there, was, in the 1990s no longer appropriate, also with its inscription. So there was need for change. And that is also maybe as a side remark, there's maybe an interesting side remark to that actually in the 1990s still, that started in 1959, there was also a kids' playground on the Synagogenplatz. And that is seemingly, really inappropriate to have kids playing around, but actually that was also one of the ideas of Carl's, I'm just saying like this, aunt, who said it's maybe also an idea to give some light feelings to this square.
In diesem Zusammenhang auch zu erwähnen, 90er Jahre, das war die Zeit, in der auch diskutiert wurde, und zwar, wie ich mitbekommen habe, auch sehr heftig, die erstens Umbenennung der Rheintorstraße oder Rückbenennung in Judengasse und zweitens auch die Neubenennung der kleinen Straße Klösterle, die direkt am Synagogenplatz nach Norden führt, am Synagogenplatz. Und die erstere Entscheidung war auch seitens der Stadt und des Gemeinderates und wirklich diskutiert und die Anwohner befragt, wie das so üblich ist, in der Regel. Und da gab es keine Mehrheit für Rückbenennung in Judengasse. Es ging so weit, dass es auch tatsächlich auch Briefe gab, ich möchte nicht in einer Judengasse wohnen. Und so war der Kompromiss hart errungen, zumindest dann zu erläutern, ehemalige Judengasse. Das war so das Mindeste, was erreicht werden konnte. Das andere am Klösterle, so wie diese kleine Straße benannt wurde, nach dem Krieg übrigens. Davor hieß sie Wag den Hals, nach einem alten Stadtturm am Synagogenplatz. Das war eigentlich jetzt keine große Sache, aber auch deswegen vielleicht, weil dort wenige Anwohner sind und wenige betroffen waren. Und die betroffen waren eigentlich auch, denke ich, dafür, soweit ich das mitbekommen hatte.
Another context of discussion in the 1990s was the renaming of streets. And actually there were two cases. It was the question of renaming Rheintorstraße into Judengasse, and then the tiny little street of Am Klösterle to Synagogenplatz. And well, the large discussion was the one of Rheintorstraße and Judengasse. And well, so this was extensively discussed, and also the neighbors were asked about their opinions, and in consequence, there was the compromise that well, Rheintorstraße stayed with a plaque, I think, added, but well, you have to see it was also because there were answers by neighbors. So, well, I don't want to live in a Judengasse. So this also needs to be taken into account. And when we see, so the second street, so Am Klösterle, which was named like this only after 1945, earlier on it had an older name, a link to a city gate. We can see, so there were actually not just a few neighbors, so not many people were living there and accordingly maybe not protesting, so it was a rather easy task to do, to rename it into Synagogenplatz. Okay, anything more?
Ein letztes.
Okay. Last. Noch eines. In meiner Zeit in Freiburg, wo ich am Staatsarchiv tätig war, lernte ich dann auch Günter Boll kennen, der dort über die jüdische Geschichte der Region, aber auch Breisachs geforscht hat und dadurch schon ein bisschen so an mich herangetreten ist mit Fragestellungen zur Geschichte der Juden in Breisach, Mülheim und wo auch immer. Und 1900, ich denke, es begann 1996, als Hans-David Blum ins Stadtarchiv kam, um weiter zu forschen an seinen großen Arbeiten zur Geschichte der Juden in Breisach und diese Publikation vorzubereiten. Und da erinnere ich mich wirklich sehr gerne, wenn er in Deutschland, in Breisach oder Freiburg war, wenn er dann ins Archiv kam und bei mir saß und wir zusammen die Archivalien durchgeschaut haben und sein Buch vorbereitet haben und schließlich, ja, ich habe zum Buch nichts beigetragen, aber immerhin habe ich so als Lektor quasi drüber geschaut und das war eine sehr intensive Arbeit und ich war mit Hans-David Blum, darf ich sagen, auch wirklich am Schluss befreundet. Und wenn Sie mich heute Morgen gesehen haben mit meiner Kippa, dann habe ich sie gerne getragen, heute auch wieder. Denn sie stammt von Hans-David Blum und war ein Geschenk von ihm, das er mir aus New York mitgebracht hat. Und deswegen bin ich ihm bis heute über den Tod hinaus sehr, sehr verbunden.
When he was working still in Freiburg in the state archives, he already was in touch with Günter Boll, who did research of the Jewish history of the region and also mentioned Breisach and also Mülheim. So there is some wider research context, and when in about 1996 he was in Breisacher already in the archives. Hans David Blum was also coming to find archival material, and so there was he was preparing his major book publication, and so Uwe Farrer was not involved really in the sort of contributing something to it, but he did some slight copy editing, and so in the end he said so he was good friends with him, and this connection to Hans David Blum meant a lot. So any of you who saw Uwe Farrer today with his kippah might seem also an expression of that connection, because that was a present by late Hans David Blum, and so this is something this kippah he very much cherishes. Thank you very much.
So I want to. When the only person here being there in 1998 is Elaine, right? And when you left, you know, there were articles in the paper, guests of the city, and when I found out that, meaning guests of the city, meant that the hotel and food was paid for a week, but not the ticket to fly here. And so your father was there, Hans Blum came and presented his book, and third person, Fred Court, and they called themselves the Three Musketeers. And after the week was finished, they had a big get-together in Baden-Baden, in the famous hotel in Baden-Baden. I think Fred Court wanted to invite everyone. So when I found out that this, was presented like guests, I got really mad, and I swore to myself, I'm going to do everything in the world that this is going to be repeated and the tickets are going to be paid. And when we had founded so that was the year 2000, in July we had signed the contract with a notary, and coming up was the 60th anniversary of the deportation. So we said, we cannot start this project and not think of the people who actually, who the house really belonged to in the memory, So we took our courage together, and Alfred von Arp, who you saw today, I don't know if he came up to you, I specifically invited him to come. He got really very, very mad because not through us, but a member came and approached him in a meeting and said, for years and years and years, people all over the world are waiting that something is happening in Breisach, and that the Jews are invited back to. It's happening in Freiburg, it's happening in Effringkirchen, it's happening in Emmendingen. So when will it happen in Breisach? So that was, du warst nicht dabei, glaube ich, oder? So that was pretty tough. I think it was August maybe. So October was coming up pretty soon. So then it took a couple of days, and Alfred von Arp, the mayor, made up his mind. And I had a meeting with him, and he said, okay, we'll do that. The city is going to pay for all the tickets, and for a week of hotel and food, and you do the organization. So this was the year 2000, and who was there? Yeah, Elaine? Only Elaine? All of you? You came very shortly. Were you there for the...
I think it was 2000 that I came.
You came we have you in a film, crossing the street with your father. And that was an amazing week. I don't want to go into details. We have hundreds of photos, and Rosita and her mother were there, and I met her for the first time. We had gatherings in the Blue House, although it smelled bad. A piano, music, and talks, and a big program. That was the first time that we organized it, but so the first and only time that the city was ready to take the cost. And magic number, 40 guests. So whenever we invite in this way, it's a magic number, and in the end, it's 40 guests from different countries.
Thank you very much. Oh, Bella. Well, dear friends, German and wherever from the world, are you ready to hear another story? A story from a little girl born in 25 in Rempartstraße. It is my mother. My mother, Gertrud Vogel, she was one of 7 children, and she was the oldest girl, so she had a responsibility, big responsibility for her sisters and brothers who were smaller. And her best friend was Helga Breisacher, a Jewish girl in the neighborhood. And she had very fond memories of her, especially also because she took part at the festivities. She talked about Matzenbrot, which she enjoys. And she also talked about when after 33, everything got different, that she had to deliver shoes to the Jewish shoemaker, but through the back door. So, yeah. And in 36, my mother lost her best friend because Helga Breisacher was so lucky to emigrate to the States. And then my mother's best friend got the leader of the Nazi German Bund Deutscher Mädchen, of the Nazi organization for girls. And this is what I remember when I was little. We went to visit Gertrud Strasser, the former Nazi leader of the girls group, in Freiburg. And I learned more and more about her past. She had quite a big role. For instance, she went to a Osteinsatz 1 year when she was 16 or 17 to support German families in Poland who had taken over Polish farms after the Polish people got out. So this was a tension between having a best friend, a girl, and having a best friend, the German leader for my mother. So let me open this window a little bit more. My mother loves singing, like I love singing too, and she loved what Gertrud Strasser, the leader of the German Nazi organization, girl organization, offered fires and getting out and hiking and nature and singing. And after the war, my mother was very, very silent. For decades, she was so silent. It was hard for us children. And my father, he was not silent. He was proud that his father, my grandfather, was a mayor who did not change party, the mayor of Oberrotweil, where I live now. But he had to, on the end of January 33, he had to leave the office because he did not join the Nazi party. So he could be sort of proud of it and talk about his father, my grandfather. And he talked also, he mentioned again and again, well, my mom, your mother was in a Nazi party. And my mother just didn't say anything about it. My parents could not talk to each other. I think that is here and there maybe the case in after-war situations. And my mother died then, my father died then in the 80s, and in the 90s and late 90s, my mother said to me, or maybe 2000, she said to me, I go to the former Jewish community center to help renovating. And I thought that was very brave of her. There were other people in the town who said, what is she doing? She did like this when she was during the war, and now she goes to the former Jewish community center. And in 2003, Christiane had offered, the opening of the house and a meeting coffee. And I told to my mom, well, don't you go there. Maybe your former best friend, Helga Breisacher, is there too. And I think alone she wouldn't have gone, but we went together. And she wasn't there, Helga Breisacher was not there at the coffee meeting, but somebody else was there. It was Henry Levy, who we had as visitors these days as well. And we had such a beautiful conversation, and then I asked, I found out also Helga Breisacher is here. She will stay in the Münster Hotel. So I went with my mom to the Münster Hotel, and we waited for hours, and we waited, and then Helga Breisacher came, and two old friends hugged each other and had tears in their eyes. And I think, so this opportunity for my mom to work, not to, she's not she was not a big speaker, but she worked and was interested, and that was a new phase of her life. And Christiane and the others made it possible. So, and she took the opportunity to do so. So that was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we spoke about roots so far. We already spoke also about effects of visits. Well, maybe already as a last question, I would like to ask everyone to fathom, to imagine maybe in 20 years' time, what would you like your kids, your grandchildren to see and experience when they come to the Blue House in 20 years' time?
Hi, I'm Julie Stieg, I'm Carl's daughter. This has really been such an incredible experience, I don't even know where to begin. I would say in 20 years' time, I just hope the Blue House is still here. I'm certain it will be, because the citizens of this town are so dedicated to preserving it and continuing to educate the youth of this community and even around the world about what happened. And if this town could be an example for every town around the world, I think we'd be living in a much different place. But I definitely want, I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I want to bring them here one day. I want them to be a part of this experience. I want them to continue to bring their children here and always have it a part of their lives and their history and be proud of it. Her daughter is here, and it's special for us to have 3 generations here experiencing this weekend together. And you know, whether it was talking to students at the local school or meeting everybody, making new friends, and just having this incredible experience of what this community has done here. You know, it's just something that I hope continues always, and we certainly will help continue that with our family.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Wald, would you like to say something and share something?
Oh, okay. Aber auf Deutsch, ich kann Englisch zu schlecht. Ich muss eine andere Geschichte erzählen. Unsere Leute, also die sogenannten Zigeuner, sie sind nicht weg, sie konnten nicht weggehen, sie konnten nicht in die USA, nach Israel, oder sie mussten hier bleiben. Sie sind aus den KZs und aus der Deportation in Polen wieder zurück in ihre Heimat gekommen. Und es vollzog sich eine zweite Verfolgung. Es wurde nicht anerkannt, dass sie Verfolgte, rassistische Verfolgte sind, sondern es wurde ihnen gesagt, ihr seid kriminell, ihr seid asozial. Es waren die gleichen Polizisten, die sie in die KZs gebracht haben, haben sie jetzt verhört. Sie mussten leben am Rand der Städte in gebaut aus Holz zusammengebauten Baracken. Erst 20 Jahre später wurde ihnen zur Bewährung aufgegeben, dass sie in Baracken wie in Auschwitz sich bewähren durften. Es hat gedauert bis in die 90er Jahre, dass überhaupt aus der Community Einzelne außerhalb der Community sich geäußert haben über ihr Schicksal. Vorher, wenn sie das taten, waren sie selber dran schuld. Wir hören heute noch, dass wir selber dran schuld an unserer Verfolgung sind, in der Mehrzahl. Es ist eine ganz andere Geschichte. Okay.
I'm just translating in the meantime. I have another story to tell. In the case of our people, which means the so-called gypsies, there was no possibility to go to the US, for example, to emigrate. So after the camps, they had to go back to their Heimat, to their home towns. And what happened then was actually a second persecution, because what they met there were actually the same police officers that had persecuted them earlier on. And they were not recognized as racially persecuted or persecuted on racist grounds, but treated as criminals and so-called asocials. So it took a very long way. They had to live outside of the cities in wooden barracks, for example, and it took 20 years until they got some recognition. And only in the 1990s, some of the minority members spoke out outside their own community about what they had lived through.
Die Geschichte der Juden hier in Breisach seit dem 30-jährigen Krieg ansässig, eine Kontinuität der Geschichte. Diese Geschichte ist auch bei uns hier in dieser Zone. Wir haben eine Geschichte seit dem 17., 16. Jahrhundert von Schaustellern, von Musikanten, von einer Gemeinschaft, die hier in Breisach den Gauklerbrunnen geschaffen hat, also sich präsentieren konnte. In der Nähe von Breisach lebt die Familie Traber, die Hochseilartisten sind und die sich jetzt auch zu ihrer Sinti-Vergangenheit stellen, was sie viele Jahre nicht machen konnten, weil sie Angst hatten, sie würden verfolgt. Unter Zigeuner gehören nicht nur Roma und Sinti, sondern gehören auch die Jennische, eine andere Minderheit. Und diese jennische Minderheit ist der größte Arbeitgeber der Region. Es ist der Europapark. Die Familie Mack ist eine jennische Familie, nur sie will das nicht äußerlich machen, weil sie sonst verfolgt wird. Die jüdische Gemeinde hier in dieser Zone, die das Westjudentum gehalten haben, was jetzt nicht mehr besteht, in Sprache und in Kultur nicht mehr besteht. Ich kenne dieses Bild, dass es an einer Kommode 3 Bestecke gibt und 3 Teller. Einmal für Koscher, einmal und dazwischen für, dass man alemannisch isst. Also die Vermischung der jüdischen Kultur mit der alemannischen Kultur ist viel höher, als wir alle denken. Ebenfalls bei der zigeunerischen auch. Und ich würde froh sein, wenn wir diese Wirkungen, diese Vielfalt, die noch in den 20er Jahren und in dem 19. Jahrhundert fassbar war, wenn wir die wieder heben und der nächsten Generation widmen.
So the Jewish community has been living in this region since the 30 years time, so since the 17th century. And the same is true also for the minority of Roma and Sinti. There had been many musicians, artists, and well, on trade fairs, and yeah, exactly. And so, for example, the Gauklerbrunnen, the fountain, the Gaukler fountain. I don't know how to translate Gaukler, to be honest. So it was actually done by gypsy people, and so there is, for example, the Traber family, who is a Hochseil artist. So it's like, you know, the people walking on a rope. Okay, so rope walking, who are pretty famous here, and however, only recently they admitted to be Sinti. Okay, because earlier on, they were afraid of the negative consequences. When we talk about gypsy, so it's Roma and Sinti, but it's also the so-called Jüdische. And actually, so one of the biggest employers of the region, or the biggest employers, so that's the Europapark Fun Park. So it's the family Mackes. So until today, they do not actually well, say that they're Jüdische because they fear negative consequences. So when we think back to the Occidental Jewry in these regions, so well, there were 3 different sets of well, knives and forks of cutlery. So it's to eat kosher, to eat well, meat Alemannisch. But what's the third one? Alemannisch. And then to meet Alemannisch. So the region. The regional actually way of speaking and the regional culture, and the same thing. Aha, okay.
ausgestorben mittlerweile.
So it's no longer there, this Occidental Jewry, but the cultural traditions were the very same with the gypsies here. Okay, so if it's possible to convey that those similarities through the centuries have been there, so then you will be very glad. Quick addition.
A very quick addition. Who of you was at the Stumbling Stone visit this Thursday? Yes. And you remember the two girls of the history workshop of the Lessing School made sort of a testimony and said, thank you very much. Your visit, dear Ronja, had a big impact on us. And what kind of impact did it have? It had the impact that they questioned their family story more and more, and they found out they are Jenische, and that the grandmother was in the concentration camp. That was the background why these two girls are so close to Ronja Beecher.
Thank you. Okay. Yep.
Gaukler is jester.
Jester is a correct translation for Gaukler. Thank you very much. The jester is founded in. Thank you. Is there anything more someone would like to share or say? Any wishes for in 20 years' times? Please.
Only to say, when I heard the history again of Nazi Germany, that the Blaues Hauses outlasted the years that the Nazis existed, and so it should continue.
I'm looking around. I think I'll hand over to Christiane and conclude soon for a final call.
Yes, I'm looking around and I know that we will be missing some of you tomorrow. I guess the suitcases are, some of the suitcases are about to be packed. That's very sad. We're, most of us, I guess, are going to dinner with Vice-Mayor Carsten Müller at 7 in the Hotel Stadt Breisach, formerly Hotel am Münster. And I'm speaking for myself and Valeska and for Florian and for Rosita. We would very much like to continue tomorrow with everyone who still is there tomorrow. There's another full day for some of us. And although the group will be smaller, I think we can continue and deepen. So invitation to meet here at 10 tomorrow and to have another round of thinking, talking, sharing stories. And for today, I want to thank everyone very much for being here and participating and writing into the book. Thank you. Also, I'm glad you're sitting here now. That's wonderful. And welcome again to Naomi, who joined our group last night. And so, goodbye. And Thomas Wald, vielen Dank, dass Sie da sind. Thank you very much for contributing here. Okay.
Thank you.
I want to extend the thank to Mike Bock for his patience to accompany us.